Before horror movies, before haunted houses, before ghost stories told around campfires had names and rules and monsters with familiar shapes, fear was already living inside the human body. It was there in the tightening of the stomach when the forest went quiet. It was there in the sudden stop of conversation when something cracked a branch just beyond the firelight. It was there in the way ancient humans scanned the dark with eyes that were never designed to see well at night, listening with every muscle, trying to decide whether that sound was wind or teeth. For most of our history, horror was not entertainment. Horror was weather. Horror was hunger. Horror was the dark mouth of a cave, the scream of an animal you couldn't see, the smell of blood on the air, the knowledge that one mistake could remove you from the world before sunrise. And the strangest part is that many of the things that terrify us today, monsters in the dark, eyes watching from shadows, being chased, being eaten, the dead returning, the unknown thing outside the door, are not inventions. They are echoes. They come from a time when our ancestors lived in a world that was beautiful, but absolutely unforgiving. Imagine yourself 50,000 years ago. There is no city, no locked door, no police, no hospital, no flashlight, no way to call for help. The sun is going down, and that alone changes everything. During the day, the landscape is alive with detail. You can see the game trails, the birds, the shape of distant hills, the smoke of your group's fire, the movement of others nearby. But as the light fades, the world shrinks. The familiar trees become silhouettes. The grass becomes a hiding place. The space beyond the flames becomes another universe. And somewhere out there, animals are waking up. Ancient humans were not at the top of the food chain in the way we like to imagine. We were clever, social, adaptable, but we were also soft-bodied primates without claws, without armor, without fangs worth bragging about. Our greatest weapon was the mind, but the mind needs time. A leopard does not give you time. A hyena does not debate. A crocodile does not warn you. For early humans, one of the oldest fears must have been the fear of being hunted, not metaphorically, literally. There were big cats with patience and silence. Leopards are still known today for taking primates, and ancient humans would have understood the danger of a predator that could wait in a tree, strike from above, and vanish before the group even fully understood what had happened. There were cave lions in Ice Age Eurasia, much larger than modern lions, moving through open landscapes where humans also traveled. There were saber-toothed cats in earlier periods, animals built like nightmares, with powerful forelimbs and blade-like teeth. And then there were hyenas. Today, hyenas sometimes appear almost comical in popular imagination, but prehistoric hyenas were not a joke. Cave hyenas were powerful bone crushers that competed with humans for caves and carcasses. Think about that. The cave you wanted for shelter might already belong to animals strong enough to drag bones into darkness and crush them like dry sticks. A cave was not just a home, it was a question. Is something inside? That question might be one of the oldest horror scenes in the human mind, standing at the entrance to a dark opening in rock, smelling damp stone, old animal musk, maybe death. You need shelter from wind, cold, and predators, but the shelter itself may contain danger. So someone throws a burning branch inside, someone listens, someone watches the darkness, waiting for the darkness to move. Long before we invented demons, caves could breathe. They could hold echoes that sounded like voices, they could hide bears, they could preserve bones, they could swallow light. The deeper you went, the less the world behaved normally. Your fire flickered against walls painted by minerals and shadow. Your footsteps came back to you from impossible directions. Your own breathing sounded like someone else nearby. It is not hard to understand why caves became sacred places in many ancient cultures. They felt like entrances to another world because, in a very real sense, they were. But predators were not the only terror. Another ancient fear was the fear of injury. Today, a broken leg is serious. In deep prehistory, a broken leg could be a death sentence, depending on your group, your age, the season, and where you were. A tooth infection could kill. A deep cut could turn bad. A difficult birth could take mother and child. A simple fall could become the beginning of the end. And unlike predators, Injury could come from almost anything: a stone tool slipping in the hand, a climb gone wrong, a thorn that became infected, a hunt that went badly, a river crossing, a bite, a burn. To live in the ancient world was to know that the body was fragile. Every scar was a memory. Every limp told a story. Every elder who survived carried a map of old disasters written into their bones and skin. This may be why humans became so intensely social. Fear did not only make us run, it made us gather. A lone human in the Pleistocene was vulnerable. A group was eyes, ears, hands, memory, defense, warmth. The campfire was not just technology, it was a boundary. Inside the firelight, there were faces. Outside, there were possibilities. Fire changed the psychology of fear. It pushed predators back. It cooked food. It gave warmth. It let stories grow after sunset. But fire also created something eerie: the edge of visibility, a bright center and a dark ring, a circle of safety surrounded by everything unknown. Sit there in your mind for a moment. You are with your group. Someone is scraping a hide. Someone is feeding the flames. Children are curled close to adults. Sparks rise upward into a sky crowded with stars brighter than most of us have ever seen. Then a sound comes from beyond the light. Not a roar. Something smaller. A scrape, a footstep, a breath. Everyone freezes. This is where horror was born. Not from seeing the monster, but from not knowing whether there is one. The human brain is a prediction machine. It would rather mistake a shadow for a predator than mistake a predator for a shadow. That bias may have saved lives. The person who jumped at every rustle wasted energy. The person who ignored the wrong rustle disappeared. So our ancestors evolved minds that were suspicious, minds that saw faces and patterns, minds that heard intention in random sounds, minds that asked, "Who is there?" even when the answer might be nothing. This is why darkness feels populated. Your room at night is not full of predators, but your brain was not built for apartments. It was shaped in landscapes where unseen things sometimes did have claws. When you feel watched in the dark, you are experiencing an ancient alarm system that has outlived the world that made it necessary. But ancient humans were also afraid of each other. That may be one of the most uncomfortable truths. Nature was dangerous, but other humans could be worse because they had minds like yours. They could plan, they could deceive, they could raid, they could steal food, territory, mates, children, tools, or lives. We should not imagine prehistoric people as constantly violent monsters. Cooperation is one of the great human superpowers, and evidence from ancient remains shows care, healing, and long-term survival of injured individuals. But conflict existed. Small groups living close to survival could not always simply walk away from competition over water, hunting grounds, shelters, or social bonds. There is a special kind of fear that comes from knowing another human group is nearby. Are they friendly? Are they desperate? Are they watching? A predator might attack because it is hungry. Another human might attack because of revenge, fear, opportunity, or belief. That makes humans unpredictable in a uniquely terrifying way. Imagine seeing smoke in the distance. That smoke means warmth, food, language, tools, maybe trade, maybe relatives, maybe danger. For ancient people, strangers were not abstract. They were a risk calculation, and every group likely had stories about outsiders, warnings passed down from elders, memories of violence or betrayal, but also memories of alliance and exchange. The fear of the stranger may be as old as the love of the tribe. And then there was hunger. Modern horror often gives fear a face, but some of the worst ancient fears had none. Hunger did not leap from the shadows. It arrived slowly. It thinned children. It made adults quiet. It turned every decision into a gamble. A failed hunt was frightening. A changing season was frightening. Herds moving somewhere unexpected could create panic. Drought could transform a familiar landscape into a trap. Snow could cover tracks and plants. Too much rain could flood shelters and spoil plans. The world was not stable, and survival depended on reading its moods. Ancient humans must have watched animals, clouds, winds, stars, insects, rivers, and plants with an attention most of us can barely imagine. A broken pattern could feel ominous because it mattered. Birds going silent, herds moving strangely, the smell of distant fire, the absence of expected fruit, these were not background details. They were messages. Some fears were immediate, others were seasonal. The fear that winter would come before enough food had been stored in the body. The fear that the group would follow animals and find nothing. The fear that a child would not survive the cold. The cold itself was a monster. During the Ice Age, humans survived in environments that tested every piece of their ingenuity. Cold steals slowly at first. Fingers stiffen, judgment dulls. Sleep becomes dangerous. Without adequate clothing, shelter, fat, and fire, the body loses its battle with the air. You do not need a demon when the wind can kill you. And yet humans moved into these worlds. They made needles from bone. They stitched hides. They built shelters from mammoth bones and skins. They learned to live where their bodies alone had no business surviving. This is one of the great, I never thought about that, truths of human evolution. Fear did not just make us hide. Fear made us invent. Fear of cold helped create clothing. Fear of predators helped create weapons and group defense. Fear of hunger helped sharpen memory, tracking, planning, and cooperation. Fear of death helped create ritual, burial, and perhaps the first serious questions about what a human being actually is. Because sooner or later, every ancient human encountered the most mysterious fear of all, the dead. A dead body is both someone and not someone. It looks like the person, but the person is gone. It has the face, the hands, the scars, the hair, but not the warmth, not the voice, not the gaze. For a mind built to understand agents, intentions, and relationships, death is deeply confusing. Where did they go? Why do they no longer answer? Can they see us? Are they angry? Are they nearby? We cannot know exactly what ancient humans believed tens of thousands of years ago, but we do know that burial practices became meaningful. Bodies were sometimes placed carefully. Some were associated with tools, pigments, ornaments, or animal remains. Even when interpretations are debated, the pattern suggests that the dead were not always treated as mere waste. That matters, because the fear of the dead may not begin with ghosts as we imagine them. It may begin with attachment, with grief, with dreams. Imagine losing someone in your group, someone whose voice you knew better than your own. For nights afterward, you dream of them. In the dream, they speak, they move, they are alive. Then you wake in darkness beside the fire, and for one impossible moment your mind asks whether they truly left. Dreams must have been terrifying and sacred. To ancient humans, dreams may have felt like journeys, messages, meetings with the absent, warnings from beyond ordinary life. In a dream, the dead return, animals speak, ancestors appear. You fall, flee, fly, drown, transform. Then you wake, and the emotional truth of it remains. Before cinema, the brain was already making horror movies every night. Sleep itself was dangerous, not because dreams could harm you, but because sleeping means surrender. Your eyes close, your body weakens, the group becomes vulnerable. This is why safe sleep is one of civilization's greatest luxuries. A bed in a locked room is an extraordinary invention. For most of human history, someone needed to notice the fire, the weather, the baby, the sound outside. Sleep was probably lighter, more communal, more alert to interruption. The night belonged to many species, and humans survived by refusing to disappear fully into it. Another ancient fear was the fear of the unseen cause. A person becomes sick, their skin burns with fever, they shake, they vomit, their breathing changes. No predator attacked, no spear struck them, no bone broke, yet something invisible is taking them. Today, we have germs, viruses, parasites, immune systems, infection. Ancient humans had observation, pattern, memory, and imagination. They could see that some sickness spread. They could see that certain foods harmed, certain waters were dangerous, certain places carried risk. But the actual enemy was hidden. Invisible danger is the foundation of some of the deepest human terror. A smell can frighten you because it hints at decay or poison. A rash can frighten you because it appears from nowhere. A fever can make a loved one speak strangely as if something else has entered them. Illness changes the familiar into the unfamiliar, and that is one of horror's oldest tricks. Maybe this is why possession stories, curses, bad spirits, and polluted places appear across so many cultures. They are not foolish ideas from foolish minds. They are human attempts to explain patterns without microscopes. They are imagination working in the dark, trying to make the invisible visible. Then there were the skies. We often think of ancient people as having a peaceful connection to nature, and sometimes they surely did. But nature also performed events so overwhelming that they must have shaken entire communities. Thunderstorms tearing open the sky, lightning striking trees and starting fires, eclipses turning day into unnatural twilight, comets appearing like wounds among the stars, meteor showers, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, tsunamis, floods. Imagine never having been told what an eclipse is. The sun is above you, source of heat, time, life, direction. Then something begins to eat it. The light weakens. Birds change behavior. The air cools. Shadows sharpen strangely. For a few minutes, the world looks wrong. You do not need superstition to be afraid. Fear would be a reasonable response. Ancient humans were pattern readers, and the sky was the greatest pattern of all. The sun returned. The moon changed and returned. Stars moved in familiar ways. When the pattern broke, the mind demanded meaning. And meaning in a dangerous world often arrives wearing the mask of warning. But perhaps the most haunting fear ancient humans faced was not any single predator, storm, illness, or enemy. It was uncertainty itself. They lived in a world full of questions that could not be answered quickly. Will the herd return? Will the child's fever break? Is the cave empty? Was that sound made by wind, animal, or human? Why did the ground shake? Where did the dead go? What happens if we travel beyond that ridge? Every day required courage, not the glamorous kind, but the quiet kind. The courage to leave shelter, to follow tracks, to give birth, to cross ice, to enter forests, to sleep, to wake up and try again. And this is where ancient fear becomes something more than terror. It becomes the engine of humanity, because our ancestors did not defeat fear by becoming fearless. They survived by becoming storytellers. A story can turn chaos into shape. It can warn children not to wander near water where crocodiles wait. It can teach hunters how a lion stalks. It can preserve the memory of a poisonous plant, a dangerous valley, a season of starvation, a group that betrayed trust. It can explain thunder, honor the dead, and make suffering bearable. Before horror movies, there were stories told in darkness by people who knew the darkness intimately. And those stories probably did what horror still does today. They allowed humans to approach fear without being destroyed by it. Around a fire, a terrifying tale becomes controlled danger. The group listens together. Hearts race together. Children learn what to fear, and adults remember what they have survived. Horror, in that sense, is not the opposite of survival. It is one of survival's oldest tools. That may be why we still enjoy fear when we know we are safe. A horror movie gives the ancient brain a predator with an off switch. A ghost story gives the nervous system a taste of the unknown, while the body remains protected. A monster on a screen awakens circuits built for leopards, caves, corpses, storms, strangers, and night. We are modern people carrying ancient alarms. When the music in a film goes quiet, your body understands before your conscious mind does. When a character walks toward a dark basement, some old part of you whispers, "Don't go in there." When something moves too quickly in the background, your eyes snap toward it because your ancestors, who noticed movement, lived long enough to have descendants. The monsters changed costumes, but the fears remained. The vampire is the predator at night, the corpse that moves, the stranger who enters the home, the disease that spreads through blood. The zombie is the fear of death, infection, hunger, and the familiar human face emptied of humanity. The werewolf is the terror of the animal inside the person, the trusted companion transformed into danger. The ghost is grief that refuses to leave. The alien is the stranger from beyond the known horizon. The dark itself is still the dark, and maybe that is the answer. What scared ancient humans before horror movies existed? Everything that could take them without explanation. The thing outside the firelight. The cave with a smell inside. The silent forest. The eyes in the grass. The stranger on the ridge. The child coughing through the night. The dead appearing in dreams. The sun disappearing at noon. The winter that came too early. The wound that would not heal. The sound behind them when they were alone. But also, perhaps, the same thing that scares us now. The feeling that the world is bigger than our understanding. Ancient humans lived closer to that feeling than we do. They did not have walls thick enough to silence the weather, lights bright enough to erase night, or explanations detailed enough to calm every mystery. They lived at the edge of knowledge, and beyond that edge was a vast darkness filled by imagination. Yet they walked into it. They painted walls deep underground. They crossed continents. They buried their dead. They raised children under ice age skies. They learned the habits of animals stronger than themselves. They turned stone into blades, hides into clothing, sparks into warmth, memory into myth. They were afraid, and they kept going. That may be the oldest human story of all. Not that we conquered fear, but that we carried it with us, listened to it, shaped it into warnings, rituals, art, and stories. Horror did not begin in theaters. It began in the nervous system of a small primate standing in the dark, holding fire, hearing something move just beyond the light, and somewhere inside us, that ancient human is still listening.